will call the member for Wannon.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And on Saturday afternoon, I went to a small rural community in my electorate called the Sisters. And there was an incredibly moving commemoration to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Battle of Lone Pine. Now, as most members in this chamber and in the general community will know, the Lone Pine battle was an incredibly important battle in the history of the Anzac conflict. In total, 2,277 Australians lost their life in the Battle of Lone Pine. The total Ottoman death toll was between 5,000 to 7,000. The Lone Pine battlefield was named for a solitary Turkish pine that stood there at the start of the fighting. The tree was situated near the centre of the eastern line of the Australian and New Zealand trenches around Anzac Cove. A 1-hour-long bombardment of the Turkish trenches at 4:30 p.m. on the 6th of August 1915 preceded the main charge. Packs had been dumped to the rear and each man wore a white armband or a piece of white material attached to his back. This was to help tell friend from foe in the close fighting in the Turkish trenches that would soon be upon them. Attacking battalions, the 2nd, 3rd and 4th Battalions, all from New South Wales, packed into the Anzac forward positions. At 5:30 p.m. the whistles blew, and as the rays of the evening sun shone into the eyes of the Turkish defenders, the Australians rose and charged. The Turks were taken by surprise. Australian forces against formidable entrenched Turkey positions, sections of which were securely roofed over with pine logs. In some instances, the attackers had to break in through the roof of the trench systems in order to engage the defenders. The main Turkish trench was taken within 20 minutes of the initial charge, but this was the prelude to 4 days of intense hand-to-hand fighting, resulting in 2,277 Australian casualties. The fighting at Lone Pine for both sides during these Turkish counterattacks was all about throwing bombs across hastily erected barriers, dashing around corners in trenches and getting off a few rounds at the shape of advancing men, slipping over the dead and avoiding the dying and wounded. General Birdwood later reported, "The boys went right through these Turkish works and had regular hand-to-hand fights every yard. To show you the nature of the fighting, I may mention that in one corner we came across 8 Turks and 6 Australians, all dead, who had evidently fought it out man to man to the last." Mr Deputy Speaker, one of the important things which occurred after the Battle of Lone Pine was that soldiers grabbed pine cones from that last lone pine, which was destroyed in the battle. And it is quite extraordinary that the pine cones that were returned, which are direct descendants from the Lone Pine in Gallipoli, the 2 of them stand in the electorate of Wannon. One stands in the Warrnambool Botanical Gardens and the other stands at the Sisters, this small rural community in Western Victoria. And on Saturday, the community from the Sisters gathered to mark the 100th anniversary, and they did so under this direct descendant of the Lone Pine. And as the sun went down, the community commemorated. And it was incredibly moving, Mr Deputy Speaker. Archie was there, and Archie watered the Lone Pine seedling from the time it was planted with his brother. And Archie told me that he remembered every day after school, ensuring that the seedling was properly nourished so that it could grow into the tree that it is today. And he stood proudly as a contributor to the commemoration, not only as someone who ensured that the lone pine continues to signify what occurred in Gallipoli 100 years ago, but as also someone who fought in the Second World War, fought for us to defend our way of life. Eric Bogle came along and played a song. And before he played the song, he talked about how he came about to write it. And he came about to write it because he wanted to commemorate what had happened at Lone Pine 100 years ago, but he didn't quite know how to do it. But the words came to him after he attended a funeral, the funeral of a veteran who fought in the Second World War. And when he went to that funeral, the children of the veteran spoke of the horrors of war that their father had been through, but how he always said to them how fortunate he was to have survived when so many around him had lost their lives. And they said that their father always said to them, every day you wake up, be grateful for the fact that you are alive and still living and that you have a day to live. And that was the theme of the song that Eric Bogle sang on a Saturday afternoon at the Sisters with the sun going down, with 400 people gathered around the Lone Pine to commemorate what not only our soldiers did on that day at the Battle of Lone Pine, but also what they did on the shores of Gallipoli to keep our nation safe, to ensure that the liberties that we hold so dear continue today, and if we have any say in it, will continue for many days to come. Mr Deputy Speaker, I think the commemoration of the 100-year celebration of the Anzac campaign has been something that this nation can be truly proud of. Nothing has given me greater pleasure than to ensure, through the grant scheme which the federal government put in place, that all the memorials that we have in the electorate of Wannon now stand as a proper tribute to the service that our Anzacs gave 100 years ago, and also the additional commemorations which were able to occur as a result of what we did through providing that funding. Right across the electorate of Wannon, I have attended moving ceremonies, seen the local community ensure that the legend of the Anzacs will continue for another 100 years. And, Mr Deputy Speaker, that, I think, is the true testament of what we are doing here in these speeches today and through the actions that the government are taking to commemorate Anzac, the Anzac spirit and all that the Anzacs did. Because if we do not continue to remember the sacrifices that have been made and the reasons as to why they are made, we are letting those down who fought for us, who gave up their lives for us, who gave the most important sacrifice that anyone can give. They were prepared to lay down their life to defend our nation and our way of life. Mr Deputy Speaker, it has been an honour to speak on this motion.